Good evening. Welcome to the March 16, 2016 Board of Education meeting. We've been in executive session discussing contractual matters since 6 p.m. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do we have some participation in government students here this evening? Yes? Okay. Your requirement is to stay till 9 o'clock. If the meeting is going on at 9, we'll take a break at 9. You'll need to come up. There'll be some sign-out sheets. You need to do that to sign the sheets. And if you have any forms that need to be signed by any of the board members, we'll do that for you. If the meeting ends sooner than that, then just come up at that time. Introductions?
Michael Cooper.
Lynn Hart.
Joanne Cunningham.
Dave Hurst.
Jody Monroe.
Matt Downey.
Charmaine Widgesinger.
Christine Beck. And Judy Kehoe.
Next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes of the March 2nd, 2000 regular board meeting.
Second.
That's the first and second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstention? That item carries. Student Senate report. Do we have a representative from the Student Senate this evening? No. Okay. Next, the interim superintendent's report. Ms. Monroe?
Good evening. I'd like to start the superintendent's report by recognizing one of our students who's joined us this evening, Hannah Thane. Hannah is a senior, and she recently won the English-Speaking Union Shakespeare Recitation Competition on Sunday, March 6th. She performed a scene from A Midsummer Night's Dream. She played Lady Macbeth. She's played in many productions and actually is in Grease, which begins tomorrow night, correct? She's the 8th first place winner Bethlehem has had the past 16 years, and she'll represent the Capital Region at the national finals held in Lincoln Center, Vivian Beaumont Theater, May 1st through the 3rd. First prize at the Nationals is a scholarship to study at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts in London, England. So congratulations to Hannah. You want to come on up?
We'll give you a special eagle.
Thank you very much.
That is.
The next item, I just wanted to have the board affirm. Last year, the board passed a resolution to not participate in field testing for the assessments. And I just wanted to make sure we have been requested so far to do field testing in grades 4, 8, 3, and 3 for science and ELA and math. So I just want to make sure the board is still in agreement with that. No field testing. No field testing. Okay. We also recently we have 7 of our students who have work on display. It went on display actually March 11th through April 3rd. The 4 Freedom Student Exhibition, which will be held at the Norman Rockwell Museum in Stockbridge, Massachusetts. The event is a one-of-a-kind for Capital Region students who are enrolled in studio and art. The 2016 4 Freedom Student Exhibition commemorates the 75th anniversary State of the Union speech by former President Roosevelt, in which he believed every American was entitled to 4 freedoms. Norman Rockwell, a 20th century American painter and illustrator, duplicated the 4 freedoms in a poster series, and these students were asked to create work of their own which honors their fundamental freedoms. The following students will have work on display if you're over near that area and want to stop in. And they will be coming to the next board meeting. Julia Marcotulio, Grace Meredith. Did you know that? Oh, I wasn't sure. Sometimes parents are shy. Grace Luddington, Sophia Potenciano, Ashley Gills, Eddie Stevens, and Lillian Auger. And I wanted to just let everyone know that that was on display currently. Also, we had some great success with our Odyssey of the Mind teams and Science Olympiad teams, and they'll be coming to the next meeting after their competitions. The Odyssey of the Mind teams actually just competed in Lemoyne College, and they finished 16th out of 54 teams around the state. This is the first time we've placed in the top 20 that anyone can recall. There were 25 events in total, and we finished first in one event and second in 3 events. And our Odyssey of the Mind teams, we actually had 9 teams, I believe, this year participate. It was at Shenendehowa, and 5 of our teams from the middle school placed first in their division, and they will be competing at April 2nd at Binghamton, so we'll find out how they did shortly after that. And that's my report.
Thank you.
Jody. I had a quick question. For the reception, we got an email about a reception for the art
The
exhibit.
Norman Rockwell?
Do we need to RSVP for that?
I believe
or-
you do.
Okay.
yes. You can let Brittany know if you'd like, and we can convey that, or
Okay.
we can,
And I really encourage people to get over there. I don't know if you've ever been to Norman Rockwell, but they have one room where the originals of the Four Freedom paintings are all around you. And it's just a very powerful statement, having those all around you.
yeah, it's a great place.
Yeah, it is a great place. It's a great honor, too.
Yeah, it is. I have it on my calendar, April 3rd.
Yep.
Great. Great job by all of them. All right. Next is the Board of Education report. As president, the only thing I have to report is that we're on track for interviewing our potential new superintendent candidates, and the district-wide committee will be doing those interviews at the end of March, and then we'll have subsequent report outs on that. Anyone else? Yes, Mike?
I just wanted to commend the lab school for the chicken barbecue that they had, what was it, 2 weeks ago? It was apparently wildly successful, and I got here very early.
Yeah.
But I just want to commend everybody who worked on that. And I just wanted to make sure the board and the administration were aware of this research brief that the state comptroller put out yesterday on school aid. I've only had a chance to skim it, but the conclusions are that they're calling for revisions and drastic simplification to the aid formulas, which I think would be a welcome change especially for Judy. But it was sort of buried in the comptroller's email message yesterday, so I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware that there was a link where you can get the PDF of the report. And I just wanted to remind the board that I have to be in Buffalo the evening of the next meeting, so I won't be here.
Well, night before the great lab school dinner was March Madness, which was a fundraiser for the Bethel Central Community Foundation, and that was also highly successful with the games and interesting games, even bubble soccer, which to me would be quite a challenge to do. I mean, some kids ended up upside down, and then they were like a turtle; they couldn't move. But there were elementary games, and then that was the middle school and high school games. But it went very well, and again, the money is used for teachers who put in applications for doing some things differently that aren't included in our budget. So it really is a great night, and great participation by administrators and staff. Jody was a referee, as Dave, you were a referee too. You had your black and white stripes on. So anyhow, that was a great night. Also, I was at the 5th grade play at Slingerland's, A Tale of the Traveling Spectacles. Not only, the kids always do a great job, and Lester Betour and Connie Clarkson work on it together, doing it, but, it was really kind of extra special because Lester actually wrote the play, and, then fit the music to it, and I just thought it was great. It was a great idea. It was kind of like The Traveling Pants, if you saw that movie some years ago.
Sisterhood of Traveling.
Oh, The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants.
Missed that one.
No. Well, these pair of pants just traveled around the world, or whatever. Well, they traveled back in history with these spectacles as a result of a science fair project. So it was cute. And also, just a reminder that Greece High School is having Greece this weekend, which looks to be very good also. And I guess just one more thing about, each House, the legislature passed their own budget bills, and so now they'll be trying to compromise, all very generous on the aid package, as you had indicated also. You know, again, they're still saying the gap elimination would be 2 years, not the single year, but I imagine there'll be a lot of bargaining with the governor over a lot of these things. So there's still some things in that aren't good, but hopefully some of those will be negotiated out.
Well, Lynn stole my two announcements. No, I was just going to mention Grease, and it looks like it's going to be a great show starting tomorrow, goes through Sunday, 4 shows. And the GEA, I mean, we should know by probably before Easter even. That's what I heard today, that they're trying to get the budget bills printed by then, so. And, you know, I talked to one of our local senators today, and there's definitely a lot of support for some sort of package of elimination, whether it's 1 year, probably more likely 2 years, but.
Both groups, Assembly and Senate, had all full restoration.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so, you know, we're in good shape.
Yeah.
But you never know.
Right, you never.
Mine's just quick, just again to reiterate that the Lab School Barbecue was a big success, and I think it just shows how much the community supports the program, and that they came out in droves to support it, and to the administration for all the advertisement and the SNNs that really made a difference, I think, in having the best year ever with sales, which helped support scholarships for students who couldn't otherwise go on some of the field trips. So I think that's great.
How much did they raise, by the way?
I think it was about $10,000. Am I right, Mrs. Fishbein? Yes. And a big thank you to Jonathan Fishbein, who's coordinated the barbecue for the last several years. He has a graduating senior, so I'm sure he will be missed in the program. It's big shoes to fill. So that was great. And then the other thing is just to thank Mr. Year, because it's the second year in a row that he's had a student go to win first place in the Shakespeare competition, and he really works with the kids. They don't get there on their own. I mean, it's nice to think that they do, but he works a lot with them, and it's because of him that we have such a tremendous program. So I wanted to recognize that. That's it.
I believe on the 6th, because our next board meeting is the 5th on a Tuesday, because the 6th is the BOCES meeting, Lynn. And I think that when someone said RSVP, I think we should be mindful we have to get back to Brittany about attending that. But it's been a few years since I have attended that, but as I recall from Pat in the past, it's a great opportunity to see highlights of the different programs that are run through BOCES and to feast on the culinary students' results of their work. So if you can make it, I highly recommend that. I hope to go back this year.
And then, okay, anyone else? A couple more things. Since the last meeting, myself and Jody and Dave were able to visit our local senator, Neil Breslin, and we thank him for listening to us and you know, supporting the community and working with us again to help hopefully eliminate the GEA. And also, Diane Giacconi is not here this evening. Her mom recently passed away, and we want to express our sympathy to her family. She's a mom of the community with 7 graduates here from BC, so our deepest sympathy to the Giacconi family. Next will be the budget presentations. And we'll, yeah.
So Judy's going to start from her
Yeah,
seat.
I don't say because they always change it on me. Okay, who's up next? Who's on first?
The overview is certainly not the main part of the program tonight, but as you know, we like to give a quick recap when we start the program or the presentations, just so those who haven't been riveted by the information can get a quick update. Tonight, the main portion of the program will be for athletics and for special education and student services. And tonight, the board will be required to adopt the legal ad in order to get that published on time with the statutes prior to the days leading up to the budget vote. Okay. Our total revenues, I think the big story here is we are eagerly awaiting for those budget bills to be printed so that we know exactly what we can expect on the GEA restoration. We're just under $1.4 million. If we were to get that restored all in 1 year. So certainly even if we can get up to half, that will make a huge difference for us. Our maximum allowable tax levy is 1.45%, which would yield $919,000 additional dollars for us. Okay. On the expenditures, this is the replication of existing programs in the 15-16 school year going forward to 16-17. We have a modest 1.62% increase up to $95.7 million. And again, a big piece of that deflated degree of increases from our fringe benefits, where we're benefiting from the lower TRS and ERS rates. With our baseline budget, we're looking at a gap of just under $1.3 million. If we go to the 1.45% on the tax levy, that will largely close the gap, although we will be presenting a series of requests for additions to the program. How much we'll be able to do will ultimately depend on the funding sources that are freed up for the program. So we will hopefully in the coming weeks get that information so that we can tie it all together. Okay.
I have a question about the GEA restoration there.
Yes.
I read an article in the Spotlight that talked about our last budget presentation, and I was pretty sure that they had underrepresented the amount of money that was, could be restored to the district by GEA.
The Spotlight was incorrect.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I think they were looking at the $361,000
That's what I saw.
gap.
As soon as I saw it,
But
yeah.
in fact, it was the 1.366 million that we could receive if it is fully restored. So, yeah, there were a few errors in the article. But, next slide, please. Okay. The additions to date, under the district-wide plan, we did request an increase in our non-instructional sub rates. Currently, the majority of our subs are earning $10 an hour. Based on the prevailing market for this area, we're recommending that we increase the custodial sub rate up to $12 an hour, and the majority of the other sub positions that we increase that to $11 an hour. The other piece of news that we're waiting to hear from the budget adoption is what will happen with the minimum wage increase. It's $15 is what is requested. There's certainly a lot of support for that, but the question is how quickly will that be required? Is it something that will be phased in a few years, or will it hit all at once? If it's phased in, these proposed increases may get us largely there, but we may need to increase that $28,000 estimate later, probably at our first meeting in April, once we know what that minimum wage impact will be. We could conceivably have to add close to another $60,000 or so if we had to go to the $15 on the non-instructional. We also would need to add more to the instructional rates for substitutes as well. So we'll fine-tune those estimates once we know what it will be, but it could be significant if we have to go fully to 15. We also requested 5 additional elementary bus runs so that we could reduce some of the capacities on the elementary buses. That was in consultation with our principals, where we were having some behavioral issues on the buses because we were placing so many students all together. 3 in a seat, they really don't have much room for shifting. So we thought that that would be an option. We do have a slide that will present some additional information on that in a moment. There was also a request for a .6 partial restoration of one of the assistant transportation supervisors, and then also an additional custodian at the middle school. So as of the last week's meetings, we were at about $325,000 for potential additions. The bus replacement proposition, Cindy Jurowitz, our transportation director, had put in a request for 10 large and 5 small buses at $1.4 million. Remember, if this is approved by the board, we publish it in the legal ad. Because it is a capital acquisition, voter approval is required on that purchase. Cindy's going to come up to the mic. If you go to the next slide, we have additional information for you on the age of the fleet. Okay. Slowly approach the mic.
Yes, so, talk about a grand entrance, okay. So we are requesting 10 large buses and 5 small buses. As you can see by the slide that we have up here, the 10 large buses are 12 years of age, and the average mileage on each of those buses is about 100,000, a little over. As for the small buses, we're asking for 3 for replacement purposes, all 9 years old with an average of just a little over 91,000 miles each. And 2 small ones for additional, for growth, actually, of students' needs. We were asked, yes,
Judy,
Cindy.
Cindy, the 2 additional,
yes.
so would you be needing 2 drivers in addition to the 5 that you're requesting at the elementary level?
We hope not. We hope not. That'll just depend on, right now, what happens is the small buses are in high demand. And so we have to take one off and we don't have another to replace it. We may have to put more routes on for special needs students next year because they're very, very lengthy this year and we have been talking about that. So it may be that. But it may not. It'll just depend, and I don't have all that information yet.
Well, and as you know, the routes go up and down throughout the year,
Correct.
depending on a lot of changes in student needs. So we always put a small buffer within the transportation budget itself so that we can cover those types of shifts. They do tend to go up and down and average out.
You just mentioned the length of time for some of the special needs students. What is the average bus run time for, what are
Well,
we talking about?
We try not to go over an hour, that's what we set it at. And right now, we're pretty close to that in some of our special needs buses, but we're also very close to that in some of our regular ed buses as well.
Can we get some information on that? Like, how many buses are running like an hour? That just seems a lot.
Yes,
Okay.
Sometimes it takes 15, 20 minutes to actually get the student on the bus,
right.
the special needs student.
Okay.
Yep, yep,
I
it
guess
does.
I- yeah, I would
And-
so
and I
mark
wouldn't-
my
I
travel
wouldn't
time
count
in that
that time.
time.
Yep, I can separate that time back out of it where it's only student load time. So even where you might see on a route somewhere that it's 70 minutes, it'll only be 60 or 55 for the students. But they are approaching 60 minutes in some cases.
Thank you.
We were asked to show what it might look like and how far we are behind in the buses because of years in the past where we didn't have any buses in '06, '07, and then we didn't really meet the needs beyond that when we were having, economic hard times. So this is what it looks like, 21 buses over this 6-year period is what we would need to do to catch up to that. Remember how we had talked last week about the 11 and the 11 with the current fleet configuration? Questions on that?
And
Yes.
then Cindy, back to the previous one where we would be replacing 2004 buses.
Correct.
Do we have any buses older than 2004 in the fleet?
No, not at this
Okay.
moment. Okay. We were also asked to look at, when we talked about the 5 new routes, and what it might look like if we put monitors on the buses instead of the 5 new routes and what the cost would be. So as we can see by this, if you look at the monitors at $15.13 an hour times 4 hours a day times the days, years, and you can see all that. And I broke it down into how many routes in each of the schools would need a monitor. So 34 additional monitors at 500, just a little over 500,000 with no transportation aid, no state aid in that, as opposed to the 195,000 with about 124,000 reimbursable by the state aid, so with a net cost of about 70,000, a little over 70.
I just wanted to clarify, Cindy, when I asked the question about this, I wasn't suggesting that we put aids on all of the buses, but it seems like there's certain ones where the principals have identified that there's some behavioral issues. And so I was suggesting that we could possibly look at
Right, and
doing
you know
aids,
what, and
but it
I-
still doesn't
yeah.
look like it would be cost effective.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, cool. So we can see that that is, the better way to go is the 5 new routes as far as cost goes. And what we're talking about when we reduce capacity, the state ed department, and I actually went to their website, and I'm not sure if you guys want to see this, but I did bring copies. There you go.
Sorry.
There you go. If you want to, just give me the copy so I can kind of go along with you. And what they're asking transportation departments to do, I've kind of highlighted some of the areas that I just wanted to touch on with regard to the 5 new routes and capacity. The first thing is that when State Ed does talk about capacity and bus routes, they talk about it in a two-prong issue with efficiency and safety. And we've hit both of those marks here in Bethlehem. We are efficient and we are safe transportation, okay? So we've already hit that. They've also encouraged school districts to gather information on the capacity use of their transportation fleets. We've been doing that for years. And in fact, when we do the routing, we don't go by the capacity of the buses. We go by the ridership, patterns of ridership. So if I know a route can hold more kids on it, even though the bus only holds 66, I'll put 70 on. For some high school routes, I have well over 100 assigned to the bus, knowing that we're fine on that. So we're doing a lot of the things that they already said. The department encourages school districts to have an available seat for those students who are expected to ride. Again, that's back to the routing by patterns of ridership, which is what we're doing. They also said that it's advisable to have an additional 10% of the seats available in case of unanticipated riders. And Joanne, I think you had mentioned that the last time. Actually, we've not taken that into consideration when we've done the routing. So in that respect, we haven't done it. But for everything else, we seem to be hitting the mark. It also says here that we encourage school districts to have a backup plan for overflow. We have that with the high school. We have that with the middle school, and we're okay there. We're just looking at the student management problems that we have on some of the buses, and the principals can speak to that as well. The concerns we have. Bullying. When you have that many kids behind a driver in a social event, it's not like a instructional classroom where the teacher's facing them. It's hard to catch all of that, and it's hard for the driver to see everything that's going on and maintain control. So we were just hoping to ease up a little bit on that and help the drivers, the principals, and the students in their frame of mind by the time they get to school. Because if they're getting to school and they're all cramped up and harassed, they're not in a frame of mind to learn either.
So the additional buses would do a couple things. It would reduce the numbers of kids on the bus.
Correct.
And it would also reduce the drive times for some of those
We
students?
would hope it would,
Okay.
but that's not a guarantee. It just depends on how we can reconfigure them. It might reduce it by 5 minutes, it could reduce it by 10, or if I still have to go past that neighborhood to get to the next one, it may not reduce the time at all.
Well, I have to say, as a parent of an elementary student, I would, and I see some of my friends out there who are also parents of elementary students who are big riders of the bus, anything that we can do to reduce those numbers on the bus. To me, adding some sort of aid on the bus is like putting a Band-Aid on something that's not the root cause. The root cause is there's too many kids on the bus. And if there's 3 kids to a seat, I'm telling you right now, that's just not going to work.
Right.
So to the extent we can minimize the behavioral issues by reducing to a reasonable level, I think you would have a ton of support from elementary parents out there. And the other issue is the drive times, because, you know, even the elementary kids are sometimes riding for 50 minutes, and they live like 3/4 of a mile from the school. So to the extent we can mitigate some of that, I think that those two are great goals, and I think those are worthy goals, and I think we would have a lot of support from parents in the community for that.
Thank you.
Before I ask that question, just going to go back in history a little bit. We had purchased 4 81-passenger buses, and that was an interesting experience, but we didn't purchase any more, and we let them run the course. And so you can imagine how many students.
That sounds
and-
like a living hell.
I think that's why we didn't purchase any more. But anyhow, now, will this, doing those 5 extra routes preclude the need for any monitors? In other words, you made the comparison. which-
Correct, yes.
So we
We
should-
wouldn't be looking to put any monitors on those buses, no. That would be
Monitors
correct.
are limited too in terms of what they can do because they can't be walking up and down the aisles while the bus is moving. So they're going to be seated somewhere on the bus. Their vision is going to be obstructed because of safety. The seats are higher, so they're all compartmentalized. So
Right.
unless it's a 6'4" monitor, they're not going to be able to see a whole lot of what's going on the bus. So, it might help somewhat, but we felt in discussing it that the best solution would be to just have fewer kids on the bus.
Charmaine?
So I just want to make sure we aren't conflating two things, because there's two things that are up here. One is the adding of 5 routes potentially, and then there's the bus proposition. So they're related, but they're not necessarily, they're not the same, because some of those
Correct.
buses, you're basically replacing buses that need to be replaced because of mileage and
Correct.
deterioration.
Correct.
And they may or may not be used on the 5 routes that you
Correct. If I have to
Got it.
keep some
Right,
of the
no, no.
replacements back, it would be the newer ones going on the routes.
Hey, yeah. Mike?
I just wanted to thank you for all the additional information.
You're very welcome.
And I think based on what we've been hearing, that, this is probably a good thing to do. But I do think we do need to keep in mind that, we spent a lot of time and effort,
We sure
especially by
did.
you,
Yes.
consolidating
Correct.
and streamlining
Correct.
our systems, both in order to keep the fleet down, but also to save money. And we
Absolutely.
have done very well in that.
Absolutely.
So I don't want the public to think that this is going to be the start of a trend to going back
Correct.
to.
And we're not looking to, just to ease your mind a little bit more, we're not looking to change community stops or the walk distances either. So that will all remain in place.
Because I know my first several years on the board, most of the questions I was getting was, why are all these empty buses
Right.
going through my neighborhood?
Right.
And those have stopped now. And so I just wanted to, make sure that the community understands that this is a very particular situation that we're trying to deal with.
Right.
And it's not a philosophical change.
Go ahead, Ron, go ahead.
The question, does, the number of routes you have listed up there, do they include any special ed routes that may be?
No.
No, so that's
No.
just
This is
strictly
strictly the
general ed
large- yes,
students that
general
no
ed,
one's
yep.
in special transportation. Okay.
Charmaine?
What would be helpful is at some point, before we adopt the final budget, to get some additional information from principals about the kinds of cases of bullying and the number of cases that they may be hearing about. And again, to have this 5 additional routes eventually prioritized with all the other additions, because we will be hearing
Right,
requests.
right.
And so we would look for the administration to put this in priority in terms of your best judgment of where it fits with all the other requests that we'll be seeing. And I agree with Mike that I used to commute to New York City from Rhinebeck, so I had a long commute into Manhattan. Sometimes I would take Amtrak, and there were 2 seats, and sometimes I would take Metro North. And there was a huge difference, 3 people to a seat, to a row versus 2. So we are accountable to the public, and we have to be mindful of that. So if buses are
Absolutely.
running at 60% capacity now, or 70% capacity without these 5 routes, we have to be mindful of that.
Well, I think, and I did some maths on some of the routes, we're up as high as 85%.
Just to comment on that, I live in a neighborhood where you've actually had to send out extra buses because the buses are too full.
Correct.
And there's too many kids in a seat, and there's just not enough seats for the kids to get on. And that, obviously, it's been addressed because now there's enough buses that come through. But, we still have to take into consideration, I know we have to be mindful of the community, but we also have to take into consideration the biggest complaint of these elementary students is being cramped on the bus, book bags, music instruments, supervision of the bus drivers. It's a recommendation by state ed, but by no means do we follow everything that state ed says. So I want to put that out there, and I actually think this is a high priority item, the 5 routes, making sure that, and also looking at the time. I was alarmed by the amount of time that you said the students were on the bus, and I think that's something as a board we should look at a little bit closer, because it seemed like a few people were surprised by the amount of time that students were on a bus. So if we could get that information, that would be great. But thanks for putting this together. Oh, and I do have a question for Judy. So you're talking about state aid here, that we would be $124,000, and the net cost to us would be $70,000. So when you put it on the budget, you give us the full cost. You don't tell us the reduction of state ed. So why, I'm just curious, why is that, that we don't put the actual costs to have, because then you have extra money at the end of the year, so I'm just,
Well, remember,
back
it's
the
on a
following
one-year
year.
delay, so we spend it in year one, and the money comes in year two. So if we get this as a budget addition for 16, 17, then you would see the bump up in the state aid in the following year.
So it
to
actually
cover
does
that.
cost us that,
Yes.
the full amount.
Yes.
upfront,
So-
but we're still getting some from the previous year,
Right,
so
so the-
it seems like something's always built in.
But I think that the clarifying piece of that is when Judy presents the overall, the revenues and expenditures,
Including-
one is accounted for in the expenditures
Okay.
like this, and then when we get our
Thank
state
you.
aid reimbursement, that's in the
other side.
revenue.
Thank you.
So it would appear next year's projected revenues. when
Yeah,
we do
but
the
it comes
budget
out in the
next year.
expenses, that's where I was
Yes.
missing the piece, thank you.
No netting.
I do have, I know you're proposing a bus route for each elementary school. I mean, looking at that, if you were to add one at Ellesmere, that's a 25% increase for Ellesmere versus a 10% increase for Eagle. So I don't know if there's, do you need five at each, one at each, or is there a
Well-
more equitable way to kind of address that? I don't know.
We can take a look at that when we're doing the actual routing, but I can tell you right off the bat, Route 13 at Ellesmere runs at least 55 on an average daily. So that's a lot of kids. So there is a need there. I know there's one at Glenmont. I know there's one at Slingerlands. But if we didn't need it there, we either would put it maybe toward a special needs route, or we would put it in the other school that maybe needs more.
Okay.
And remember that the routing work that Cindy and Transportation are doing is ongoing.
Right.
Always subject to the changes in the kids. So if it turned out that there were some other changes within the program, we're not just going to add the 5 routes because the board has approved it and it's in the budget. So if the way it works out when you're looking at it, we ultimately only need 4, we'll add the 4,
Right, okay.
and then that'll be unexpended monies in the budget. Okay.
Thank you very much for your consideration.
Yep. Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you. We also have a proposed capital outlay project, again this year in the budget. This will be $100,000 as a transfer to the capital fund. So if the budget is adopted and approved, this will allow the 4th phase of improvements to occur at the high school pools.
And Judy, just to clarify, that's different than the reserve fund we set up.
Correct,
So
correct.
we had the approval of the community to establish.
Yes.
Okay.
That's all expended completely. Okay. And now it's time for athletics. So, Mr. Keys.
Good evening, everyone. It's very loud. And I want to thank the Board of Education for allowing me a few minutes tonight to just share our 2016-17 athletic budget.
I'm going to make a suggestion. You can always swivel that cart, no, you can swivel the whole cart, so you're facing that but still talking to the microphone, too. Kind of lean
I'd like to look
sideways.
at the big one. Thank you, though. I'd like to start with just showing the breadth and depth of our athletic program. As you can see, we have 75 different athletic teams broken up into varsity, junior varsity, freshman and modified. A couple of deeper numbers. 15 of our varsity programs are female programs, 15 are male, and we do have one coeducational program, which would be our unified basketball. The district and the Board of Education appoints 101 coaches annually. That includes our district budgeted coaches, as well as program assistants, and straight volunteers. All said and done, when you add up the participation numbers, we are looking at just under 1,800 student athletes per year. So, as we look at our budget, 15-16 school year versus the budget projected for next year, we'll start with coaches and chaperones. These are a very slight increase based on contracts, steps for coaches, and a slight increase in the need for chaperones, just to make sure that we're staying up on the safety of our athletes as well as our spectators. We look at our equipment piece and we see a significant decrease. I would like to just take another second to thank our Board of Education for allowing me to have such a robust equipment fund this year. We were able to really address a lot of really needy areas. Wrestling mats at the middle school, a new cart for the athletic trainer to be able to get from point A to point B, again, ensuring the safety of our athletes, field hockey goals that were over 20 years old, So I appreciate your support. It really helped us get into a very good place moving forward. Officials' fees, our athletic trainer services contract, security, meaning the Bethlehem Police Department. Again, a slight increase. The officials' fees, we are currently in negotiation. The section is with our officials organization, and they are looking at some slight increases. And these are some examples of our major program expenditures. I believe the next slide will show additional ones. If we could just go back real quick, I just wanted to mention one other piece. Other supplies is also a small decrease. Those are mainly our consumables, balls, pads, uniforms, and you see a slight decrease because we did have a small line item for relocation of games, waiting to see how our major capital project. We're very happy to say all our competition fields are up and running through a lot of cooperation with Mr. Nolte's department, our groundskeepers, and our coaches all being very flexible. So budget to budget, we're looking at a nearly $11,000 decrease when you compare. These are just further examples of some of the other program expenditures. We saw the officials' fees, the athletic trainer on there, and police coverage. Other items would be the ice rental fee, which is the YMCA where our ice hockey program plays. Entry fees would be invitationals, tournaments for cheerleading and wrestling, cross country, track and field. The lifeguard fees in our pool, as well as the mandated football helmet reconditioning. We're looking at two major athletic additions or additions to the budget, hopefully. The priority, as I view it in this day and age of interscholastic athletics and the safety and health of student athletes, would be to replace the service contract for our athletic trainer services with a full-time employee at an additional cost of the district of $18,000. This would provide a number of advantages for not only the athletic department, but also the district as a whole. Currently, as we know, we are contracting through an outside vendor. Every year, we never know if we're going to get the same athletic trainer. We've been fortunate in the last 3 years to have the same trainer who's provided a great service to the school district, but there is no guarantee that we will have him back or any regularity in who the athletic trainer would be. Again, knowing and being familiar with student athletes' medical histories, dealing with particular families and family needs on communication, really having wonderful rapport with the school physician as well as private pediatricians in our community have really assisted us. Another major requirement and responsibility for the position would be for the athletic trainer of the district to really oversee and coordinate the return to play process. For those of you who may not be familiar, return to play has to do with concussion management. It is a very strictly observed, very closely tracked piece of information. Right now, our school nurses at both the secondary buildings, the middle school and high school, spend a tremendous amount of time managing and tracking students that are coming off of diagnosed concussions. Just to give you an example of some of the numbers, last year we had close to 80 diagnosed concussions in the school district. All of those students needed to go through the return to play protocol. That was between the middle school and the high school. Our numbers are lower this year. However, year to date right now, we are looking at 45 diagnosed concussions between the middle school and high school, with obviously another full season about to start. He would be, or she would be, responsible for dealing with acting as a liaison between our health office, our students, student athletes, physicians, and families. The trainer would be responsible for basically tracking and ensuring that students are progressing successfully through the 6-day return to play protocol. Another major advantage would be dedicated daily hours to work with athletes post-injury in the rehabilitation process. In addition to having athletes be able to safely participate quicker, it would also save parents the need to go to extra physical therapy pieces, doctor's appointments, which could result in a savings for families, as well as, again, our coaches having a better communication with the trainer on the status of injuries. Another piece would be our in-house CPR first aid training and certification of faculty, coaches, and staff. One of the major requirements is the district athletic trainer would need to be a certified instructor, either from the American Heart Association or the Red Cross, in providing that first aid training as well as CPR training. Just as an example, in the 2014-15 school year, the district incurred expenses of almost $4,000 to recertify kitchen staff, transportation, physical education teachers, and of course, coaches also, in order to be board appointed each year, need to maintain their certifications. So having an in-house person be able to do that would be, again, a financial savings as well as timeliness, being able to get those items done. In coordination with the physical education health department, we would be able to organize and instruct hands-only CPR for graduating BCHS students, which is part of graduation requirements. So again, wonderful opportunity. And really one of my favorite parts of this would be the establishment of a student athletic training program. We would have an application process, and students interested in pursuing athletic training as a career would be able to receive hands-on instruction and observation of what an athletic trainer does, what kind of services they provide. It would also help in career readiness and possibly post-high school areas of study. Yes.
Since most of the athletic trainers are part of, private vendors, will it be hard to find somebody to actually, for us to hire as an employee of the district? With all these qualifications?
Interestingly, the qualifications for a NATA certified athletic trainer are extremely difficult to achieve. Right now in the Suburban Council, there are 7 school districts that already have full-time athletic trainers as part of their employees. There are 3 others, Bethlehem and 2 other districts, that have it as part of their budget requests. And we have basically been speaking to local colleges that offer these programs and trainings. And we also have an opportunity we are in the midst of a 5-year RFP with an athletic training vendor. We do have an opportunity to opt out at any time following years 2 and 3. This is the end of year 3 of that 5-year program. So we would certainly be able to interview those that have trained for us currently and previously as well. So we have a short list of people that we already would want to speak to for the position. But of course, we'd advertise it and have an interview process.
Can I just ask you to clarify 2 things? One is, did you just say that the majority of the suburban council schools have full-time trainers?
7 have current full-time employees that serve as full-time athletic trainers. Bethlehem, Colony, and Averill Park currently have it part of their budget process, leaving 5 school districts that are still contracting with vendors.
Great. And the other thing is that student athletic trainer is really an observer role.
Correct.
And the students involved in that program would not be actually
Correct.
serving their
Correct.
peers.
And due to HIPAA and FERPA rules.
Right.
But really, just the idea of being able to understand the role,
Sure.
seeing what educational process would take, and just having some exposure to seeing what they do, but it would be an observing role.
I have a couple questions. Who does the responsibilities for the return to play process right now?
Currently, it's a combination of the health offices, our nurses, as well as physical education teachers, and our part-time athletic trainer.
And is there any problem with this program currently, that it's not working properly? Or?
The main problem is it's extremely time-consuming, and our nurses, who are probably doing the vast majority of it day to day, it does often take time away from serving as best they could the rest of the student body in the building. So it's extremely time-consuming from the standpoint of finding students, being able to have them perform, the next level to get cleared, as well as then tracking that, communicating those things with my office, the coaches, and again, a back and forth with the school physician who ultimately clears students of concussions, and of course the private pediatrician. So it's really a lot of legwork, and I believe just with the sensitivity to awareness on concussions, many concussions are being diagnosed that even as recently as 3-4 years ago were not being diagnosed. Mm-hmm. So we have large numbers, and of course, as you know, we have a district concussion policy that we have to strictly adhere to. So this would really assist our health offices tremendously, assist in the communication of those students improving, and just be all around a safeguard for the district.
And you have on here dedicated daily hours to work with athletes post-injury. They aren't doing that now, or they are?
No, currently our current athletic trainer, very minimal amount, comes in around 2:30 p.m. Practices start 3 p.m. He currently is wrapping and wrapping ankles and shoulders and knees, is looking at some injuries, does very little, and then needs to be outside. Basically, currently in the springtime, to be outside with approximately 600 athletes outside
But that would be the same if we had somebody on staff, though, wouldn't it be the same? Because kids get out of school at 2:30, they'd still have that window to have the post-injury therapy done prior to going to practice. So there wouldn't really be a lot of additional time to do the daily hours.
There'd be time during the day, during the
Like if
school
they
day,
had
if
a
they have
free
lunch
period or
or study
something.
hall
Okay.
or pieces like that.
And what is the cost on the CPR first aid training that we, that we're paying for faculty, coaches, and staff? If you know that number, I don't know if you know.
It is, it's about $3,960, and that's for kitchen staff, physical education, and
Okay.
transportation. Coaches are not part of that. That's separate. Coaches pay for their own recertifications. One of the problems is also finding service providers in a timely manner. In order for me to be able to recommend a coach to the superintendent for your approval, it's a lengthy process, and oftentimes, local providers do not have the classes in a timely manner, so we have to wait oftentimes, and we're short prior to the starts of season, so this also alleviates that.
Okay, thank you.
And our second addition budgetarily would be the addition of a modified boys and girls cross-country team, which would be a fall program, as well as the addition of a modified boys and girls track and field teams in the springtime. As you can see, it's a cost of total of $12,300. Those costs for the program would be the coaching stipends, transportation, participation in, that would be 3 away meets and an invitational, uniforms and fees, and really does a couple of really great things. First and foremost, it provides more opportunities for our middle schoolers, our modified student athletes, which, as I've mentioned, as you've heard me say probably 2 other times, is the foundation of the interscholastic athletic program. But in addition to that, through the addition of a modified program, we would be reducing the APP numbers. You may recall it used to be called selective classification, where varsity coaches, high school coaches are asking for middle schoolers to come up. We would still have that opportunity for truly elite, physiologically mature, elite athletes. Oftentimes, we're getting big numbers still recommended in the running sports. This would allow those students to run at a more appropriate level. In addition, would reduce the numbers that we currently are holding on our high school teams. And I know we've talked about it here. We have very, very large numbers in our cross-country and track and field teams. I can just tell you right now, I just saw our spring roster for our spring right now. We have 178 girls runners in the girls track team, and we have 128 boys on that. So again, just over that 300 mark, for track and field. I would say approximately 30 to 35 are middle schoolers. So again, that can alleviate those numbers a little bit.
Len, did the Suburban identify this modified as 789?
Correct. Yes, this would be similar to what we did with softball and soccer, 7, 8, 9. That does not mean, ninth graders could not run at the high school level. They could. But again, this would be more of a real modified fundamental program.
So something, can I ask you about those ninth graders?
Yes.
So if you have a modified team, if a coach did not invite a ninth grader to come up to try out for either run varsity, I don't know how to try out, but JV and varsity, would that student have to be in the modified program as a ninth grader?
The student would have the opportunity to try out for JV because they're high school students as the ninth grade. They wouldn't have to be, recommended from a APP standpoint. But the coach would have the student come up. They would have a 3-day tryout. And if the ninth grader was doing well, they would stay in that role. If it may be someone new to the sport, maybe isn't in the condition needed to successfully compete at the JV level, then they could run at this modified 9 level.
What I would like to have more information, if you could talk with the coaches and come back to the board, is because my kids run track. And I'm not sure how varsity and JV are actually handled. I do know because my kids do it, but so in terms of having a quote JV team, it's not necessarily timed JV runners, as I recall, to be considered a JV runner. So I would like more information about who's actually on varsity, who's on JV, because in the idea of trying out for a JV team that already has 25 kids for one event on it, I would like more information on how they place and determine varsity.
How they
and JV
designate
runners.
varsity and junior
That's right.
varsity. Okay.
Because I think it could be very easy for every single ninth grader to say, I'm trying, because there aren't, as I understand, there aren't actually tryouts.
Correct.
So.
Right,
so-
it's a
So it
no-cut
wouldn't necessarily
sport.
funnel off as many athletes on the ninth grade level, potentially. So I'd like just more clarification
Right,
on that.
absolutely, and I'll be happy to get that. I think that the target really isn't so much lowering the number of freshmen running on the high school rosters. It's really to provide opportunities for modified students, as well as limit the number of 7th and 8th graders who are basically, because we don't currently have a modified, coaches are still trying to recommend them up. And I know as a track parent, you see many young runners, throughout our programs.
It would be interesting to know how many kids on those current rosters are 7th and 8th graders too. That would be it. Again, to get a fuller perspective of what the impact might be as actually the numbers of those track teams. Thank you.
Len, how many other suburban council schools have the modified team at this point?
Right now, it is 8 schools. However, I want to say, actually, I have it. Twelve other schools have put in for it for this coming year.
It's new for next year.
It's a real, it's again, similar to you last year again, when we moved.
So there would be
certain
20?
things. There would be a total of, well, 7 currently, and there would be a total of 13. So 6 more additional ones, with 2 others having it on their budget, but because their numbers, budget aren't as strong right now, it's kind of on a lower list of priorities.
Okay.
But it will be the vast majority of schools.
Anyone else? Any
I have a
questions?
couple
Joanne does.
Oh,
questions.
yes, go ahead.
Can you go back to the slide with the athletics budget? I think it was one of your first, after the team one.
That one?
So, yeah, so a couple questions here. One is, we had talked, and maybe this is somewhere else, about providing busing to kids in sports that currently don't have busing. Hockey, I think bowling. So is that built into the budget somewhere else?
So we met on that, Cindy and Len and I think we talked about that for bowling and hockey, we could easily do it at no cost, I believe.
Bowling
right?
is currently
Bowl-
being served.
Right,
It'd be golf.
bowling is currently an option.
Okay,
So in hockey, we could. I think that we have tried to offer it in the past, and the kids don't take advantage of it. The cost potentially would be with JV golf, not varsity golf, because varsity golf, they go to Normanside. So that's
Okay.
easy right after school, drop them off. JV, though, is at Colony.
Correct.
So there
Oh.
would be, we could certainly transport them, but then obviously, parents would pick them up or they would have to find a way home. So in talking with the coaches, I think you said that they weren't sure it would be utilized for that.
The hockey coaches, again, also part of the problem was the rink time, being able to have the rink available at
Right.
3
Right.
o'clock. But that seems to be, Rusty is working with us pretty
Right.
well, so that should be able to work out. The golf coaches strongly do not feel it's a need. They feel that the buses would be empty, that most students like bringing their bags over. They would have problems with getting clubs on the buses, especially with students on the bus already as part of regular bus run. That was one of the concerns. They genuinely felt that it was not going to be utilized.
But for the ones that are, if they were right after school and they were going to the Y, to Normanside or bowling, we certainly can provide that at really
Right.
no cost because we already have transportation. Obviously, if it's a later time, just like all of our other sports, kids have to get to wherever their practices are.
right. Now, I think on the hockey side, I mean, I know that it's a mad dash to try and figure out, especially, my son was on the team as a freshman, and it was truly, kind of a mad dash to try and figure out, how's he going to get a ride? And, the issue with hockey is also, even if you can get a ride with somebody who can fit you in the car, they can't fit you and your bag.
Right.
So, it's a little complicated, and I know, we had an 8th grader this year on the team, we had a couple of freshmen. I mean, it is truly sort of this catch-as-you-catch-can kind of situation.
That's why I make friends with a kid who has an SUV.
Yeah, you do, but a lot of kids don't have, space for you. So, I know this request came to me from another booster family who said, it's really, really complicated to try and figure out how to get my kid to practice every day. And it is, a school sport. So before we assume that the hockey crowd wouldn't access it, I mean, I think they probably would if it was available.
Do you know when that was offered? Because at least during my time in the hockey program, that was never an option.
I believe Mr. DeMayo said about 5 or 6 years ago.
Can I ask a question, though? Why wouldn't you put those, because this practice start like at 3:15?
Well, it's
Yeah,
very.
3:30, Ned?
Oh, because I was gonna
3:30?
say, don't you run a late bus that leaves the high school
Yeah,
at 3?
so that's-
you can
That's
just put
what
those
they would
kids on
do.
a late
So
bus.
exactly, and that's when Len and Cindy and I had met. If it's a program that is meeting at 3:15, 3:30, we have buses that can easily get them there. I think that what Len heard from the coaches is not a lot of kids really want to take the buses.
Yeah, that might
but-
have been from the kids, but I'm telling you, the parents of the
parents are-
kids.
So we can offer it, I mean, the
Yeah.
buses go right by the Y, or they
That
go
would be
right by
terrific.
Norman's.
That would be terrific.
The main problem, or I should say, the main issue that needed to be resolved was getting the assurance from the Y that we would be able to have access
Right.
to the ice at that
that
time. We
time.
wouldn't want the students to be part of a regular bus run, right up the road, be dropped off, and then be waiting around for an hour and a
Right.
half for the ice to be available. So as soon as
Right.
we have the assurance, which we did receive from us,
Yeah.
that we would have access, because sometimes it's not always that way.
Well, and they're getting there early anyway, because it takes a while to put all that gear
Well,
on.
correct, right.
So it's not like they're showing up at 3:25 for a 3:30 practice.
No.
They're showing up at 3 o'clock, and, you know,
Right.
being teenage boys, it takes them longer than regular people, so, you know. So that was one question, but I'm glad we're trying to figure that out, because I know that would be a big bonus and very, very helpful to our.
There's, in response to sending those buses to those locations, there's really no additional
Well,
cost to the
that's
district.
even a bigger bonus then.
Yeah, the
so-
only one was the JV golf.
The JV golf.
Which is,
Okay.
which
Okay.
would be like a field trip.
Right. So my other question is, so you mentioned uniforms are in other supplies?
Correct.
Okay.
That's
Are
included.
we, I remember a presentation that you talked about, we're on a rotation of 4 years, 3 years?
Depends on the sport,
Okay.
typically 4 to 6, depending on the sport.
Okay.
This year, as an example, we purchased 22 sets of uniforms for 17 different programs.
Okay.
Which was a huge dent that was made. We have another year of that sort of activity in
Okay.
uniforms. Ice hockey is one of them, football, soccer has new mandates from NFHS that have to be met, and we have another host of sub-varsity teams across the board that need them.
Okay, so we're on a more flexible, because I do know that some sports, you know, hockey, football, those
Correct.
uniforms look pretty beat up after
are.
one season.
Right, the nature of the
Yeah, just
sport
because
and,
the, you know, bigger contact. So you're comfortable that that number is a good number?
Yes.
To meet the needs of our
We're
teams
probably,
looking
this, you know,
nice
like
on
last
fields?
year, we had a definitely reinforced, you know, supply code, which included the uniform piece. This year is the same level of that, which will get us pretty much on target. We may need 1 year, you know, next year again to kind of get the last pieces to it, probably not as high. But we're going to be on a 5-year cycle.
Okay. And then my other question is, I know you mentioned equipment. You know, we invested a lot, so we don't need to put much in there, but 5,000 seems a little skimpy. We truly, that's going to meet the need of...
5,000 is like a standard, what you
Okay.
would standardly, you know, ask for, unless you had specific requests. So this year, we knew going in, we needed the golf cart for the trainer. They were both
Right.
20-plus years old. The wrestling mats in the wrestling room in the middle school were like concrete. Field hockey goals were taped and nailed together so many times. So we knew we
Right.
had a list going off of that, and we were able to really complete the list, including pitching machines, L screens, I mean, you name it. We really were able to get the coaches what they need. That $5,000 will be really to do a couple of other smaller items, and really, you always want to be in a position where you can replace something, you know,
Okay.
if you have a problem during the season that you are required to participate.
Okay. Okay, and just a final comment, I think you've done a really good job with some of the new coaches that you've screened and pulled into the district, and heard really nice things from lots of the sports parents. And also, I think that program assistant kind of category has been, I see nods from our BCAA folks, but that's been a really good way for some of the booster clubs to, at a reasonable level, be able to help the team by supporting additional folks to help out in the sport. So thank you for both of those things, and good job.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions. On the modified boys and girls, you said there was 35 seventh graders, 35 eighth graders? What were the numbers?
Currently, the numbers are in the mid-30s of middle schoolers running on the high school teams.
And did that number include ninth graders?
Nope, that's middle schoolers, 7th and 8th
Okay,
graders.
so what would you, because it would be 7th, 8th, and 9th, how many ninth graders currently are running, would you say? Or do you have any idea?
Many. I couldn't, I would say easily 75
Okay.
combined with boys and girls.
And do you think the cost would be, it could go down at all? I know it included coaching, transportation, uniforms. Are the meets separate from the JV varsity meets? They wouldn't be running events at the same day where
They would
could-
not. No,
Okay,
they would
so that'd
not.
be
And also the
separate costs.
buses would not, the need for the amount of buses we would probably need wouldn't be available. Currently now, when we have varsity meets for track and field, and that includes freshmen and JV, they all go together. Sometimes we have 6 buses going out just for track and field or cross-country in the fall, depending on the numbers. Cross-country is smaller, definitely
Right,
smaller.
right.
The winter track and field and the spring track and field are our 2 very large pieces to it.
I actually couldn't believe you could do it for 12. That's pretty,
Well,
pretty
that would
good.
be, that would include 3 away contests, so that's 3 buses. And depending on where, we of course wouldn't have a schedule generated until probably late next fall for next spring, as an example. That would include a modified level of uniforms. Coaching stipends are approximately in the $1,800-$1,900 area. That would have to be negotiated because we don't currently have that line item in our coaching schedule. But that's a good estimate as to what it would cost.
And I guess along the lines where Charmaine, I think, was going with it, I don't have any students in track and field, but I do hear complaints about the number of students that are running. They don't always get recognized because they're not always looked at. I guess in the beginning, when you're doing times and things like that, you might not always get timed. So you're looking more for like a process on how the ninth graders are going to qualify for like JV. Is that where you were going?
What I'm proposing, or my experience, and I may be misinformed, so that's why I'm looking to come back, is I'm not sure which ninth grader is going to choose to go to modified. I think most of them, if they have the choice, will choose to run on the high school team. So,
And that's
Right.
where the piece is, I don't believe it would be a choice.
Right, and that's what I
Which
wanna-
would be a difference in philosophy currently.
okay, see, I thought when I asked you, could a student choose to be modified or
They could
or
choose
high
To try out.
They can try out. They would choose to try out. The high school member starts a week before the modified.
Okay,
So they would have those 3 days to see.
okay.
The main focus of this, though, is not ninth grade. The main
That's what I'm
focus
saying.
really is 7th and 8th graders in 2 capacities. One, to be able to offer up more programs at the middle school, which we don't have a tremendous amount of modified programs. And 2, to be able to give those 7th and 8th graders, mainly 7th and 8th graders, who really want to get involved in running in our district, which of course, as you know, is a very strong program here, both boys and girls, give them that opportunity to run for the school team, when right now they would need to be recommended through an APP process. And again, the state ed has raised the bar tremendously. It's not how it was a couple of years ago.
So what I'm suggesting is it's going to be primarily a 7th and 8th grade program, which is
Right, so
fine.
we're
We
looking
should
at
just-
It's 30
Primarily, it's going to
students.
be, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
It is going to be.
How many seventh and eighth graders? I know there's a couple that run varsity at seventh and eighth grade levels. How many of that 30 are already running varsity levels? So are we going to see that impact of 30 if we still continue to have?
The students that are currently running there are not going to be, demoted,
Right, no, no.
If they've already met the guidelines that the state offers. Students in the 7th and 8th grade who demonstrate that elite select ability are still going to have that opportunity to try out, be recommended, and make a varsity, or a high school team, I'll say, because there's obviously the different variations in there. So that opportunity will still be there for those students that demonstrate true elite skill. It's for those students that are very good athletes, mainly age-appropriate athletes who want to run track, and currently we don't have an appropriate placement for them. So it gives them the opportunity, it gives them an appropriate placement, and it allows the growth that the Suburban Council in general in this modified area is looking to do, allows us to continue to be able to train our kids along with the rest of the council.
I actually think that if you introduce this at the modified level, you're not just going to get those 30 kids. You're going to get a lot more kids that have a new option of track and field or cross country as a place to kind of get involved in sports that might not have ended up on that pathway. But the other thing is, so I think this is great. I think it's a way to involve middle school kids in another sport, great opportunities. But I also hear the same things about how big the varsity and JV programs are, and I do appreciate the coaching, staffing, that's a lot of kids, and there's health and safety issues. I'm just wondering if maybe we could be mindful and have something sort of, maybe revisit this when we can see the data after we see the number of kids that actually opt into this sport, what effect it has on JV and varsity. So let's see if it really helped kind of deflate those numbers. And if it didn't, can we come back at some point and really talk about, should we be putting more athletic department resources into track and field to address some of the staffing issues? I really like how it's a sport that so many kids can participate in. And yes, it's social for a lot of them, but you know what? So what? They get to wear their school colors and be on the track team. And, maybe they're not the superstars. Maybe they are just having a good time with their peers and other students. But so I hesitate to sort of say, okay, the answer is, well, let's just limit it. Maybe the answer is, let's keep it going, but add some more coaching or do something structurally to meet the needs of that big sport. And, and that's okay, because these are kids. We're here for the kids. If they get to wear their team colors and be on the Bethlehem track team, and they're there because it's a lot of fun and because, they enjoy that, then so what? That's good too.
Do any suburban council schools actually cut members of their teams?
No, it's a no cut across the council. Of
Even
course,
Shen?
Even Shen. We are, Shenandoah, Saratoga, Shaker are all and have the same numbers as we do. They're all in the 100 to 150 students on the boys and the girls team. We're all AA, largest schools in the region. So it is no cut, though, across the board. I can tell you that our varsity head coaches of both the boys and girls programs have made it a real point to make sure that, yes, while you don't have to be an elite athlete, we expect a commitment. It's a varsity sport. You're there, and if you're not there, then they have team rules in place where after a while you're going to be asked to no longer show up because you need to make that commitment level.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
And that's-
to what end do we have these numbers continuing
Yeah,
to
but that's
grow?
appropriate.
But it is very
Completely
appropriate
appropriate,
measures.
yeah.
Yep.
At the same time, this is, it's not unusual for ninth graders to be on a modified team. I remember back, the varsity swim team was too large, and they cut all the freshmen, I remember, because my son was cut, and had to swim at the middle school in the modified team, which was tough, but obviously he had friends, too, that were doing the same thing, and,
It's a pendulum. That's coming back now. The
obviously the
modified 9
pool
level is
is,
coming back again.
you really have to restrict numbers there
Not to,
with the pool,
yeah, not
Well,
to
as
yeah.
opposed to,
Not to belabor your numbers on this thing, one thing I would flag is that uniform piece for the modified, because it's my understanding that the high school level, the kids buy, I know there's a treasurer out there, kids buy their own uniform
Correct.
because of the numbers. So if you provide uniforms for the modified team, those teams, I would not be surprised if the high
Well-
school team says, buy us 150 girls' uniforms. So I understand the dilemma here, but just be mindful that if you provide uniforms for some, the district, I would not be surprised if people come back and say, well,
I can tell you that every single varsity coach has been told, give me your uniform requests.
Okay.
And
Okay.
both boys and girls track head coaches have told me, they've spoken to their kids, they just like buying the tank tops, they like buying those, they don't like the white because it stains. They have their rationale, and they do not
Okay.
want us, they don't like the ones we would purchase, so they have given me a whole litany of reasons.
Their parents might want them.
Yeah.
Their parents may want it, they do not. But
okay, got it, thank you.
Any other questions for Len? Thank you very much,
you.
Len.
And again, these additions will be prioritized by the administration for a finalist, correct? Yes, thank you.
Next, we'll have Special Education Student Services by Kathy Johnston.
I don't think I want to touch this thing, but hopefully I'm tall enough. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for letting me showcase the Special Education Department's programs. So when we talk about special education, there's two huge things that we talk about. The first is the services that we provide. And the triangle here represents our continuum of services, starting with least restrictive and moving to the most restrictive. At Bethlehem, we do believe in inclusion for students where we deem it appropriate. The second part of this is the number of students that we're servicing. This year, that number has really jumped up. We're at 772 students that we are servicing for both special education, CSE services, and 504. It's important to note that that number, as I said, is up by 61 since July. So of that 61 students, we had almost 40 of them move in sometime between July and just last week with an IEP that we needed to service. So that was been a really big uptick for us this year.
And we didn't have many move out, right?
Not at the same rate,
Yeah.
no. The second thing that we really look for in talking about our services is kind of the location and the disability type that we're servicing. So we've talked about the fact that it's really, most of our services occur at the elementary level, and you'll see both from last year's numbers and this year's, that's where the highest number of students serviced are. But with that increase that I talked about at the last slide, we have had the numbers go up at both the middle school and the high school. So both of them are up by 10 students this year, which could be close to a caseload for a staff person. So when we did the numbers of all of our students, and I want to really clarify this, we're up to servicing about 15% of the population. That includes 504 and special ed. When state ed gives us the numbers, they don't include the 504 students. So that looks a little higher than our state report. So breaking our department down into our expenditures. In special education, we really kind of find ourselves in 4 different departments. So the special education is our teachers and our speech therapists. And that is the bulk of our expenditure up there at $10 million. We have our health services that we supply district-wide, our psychologists, social workers. So that grand total is $12,258,000, up contractually by $349,000. So then we look at our expenditures by type. The first one is our salaries, which of course is the bulk of our budget. And that represents really 72% of our overall budget. I have almost 200 people that are part of the special education department, so it's a big amount. The next 2 line items are tuition paid to out-of-district placements. These 2 line items are in my budget every year, and they go back and forth with which one is going to be higher. This year, tuition paid to other schools or our private schools, like a Wildwood or a Parsons, you can see that number went down from last year, but our BOCES services were up pretty significantly. So we've had a huge increase with students with mental health issues, very consistent with other districts in the capital region, and we've really been looking at additional ways and some creative ways of servicing those students. But this year, as I mentioned, with that increase in number, 7 of those students were outplaced. They came to me, plus just recently I've had to outplace a number of students. So our BOCES line item is gone up quite a bit. Our other operating costs include consultants that we use and other services and supplies that we need. So back to that bottom line of the 12 million. So looking at our staff and who's part of the special education department, we have 37 special education teachers servicing our K-12 programs as well as our non-publics. We have 12 speech pathologists in the district. Currently, we have 101 aides to students with disabilities. We have my position and the 3 CSE chairs that work with me. We have 4 occupational therapists and 2 physical therapists, so 6 altogether. And then we have 6 clerical staff that work in our office. It's actually six bodies with 4.8 FTEs. So that totals $6,900,000. Continuing with the positions, we have 11 nurses. That's down from 1 from the previous year. We had a one-on-one nurse with a student that we were able to move away from. We have 2 clerical staff for the nurses. One is at the middle school and one is at the high school, given the volume that's in both of those buildings with immunizations and a lot of the sports physicals that Len talked about. We have 7 psychologists district-wide and 7 social workers. The next line is our substitutes and the extra help and overtime, and that's up by $17,000 from last year. The beginning of this year, when we had a number of those students move in, we've talked about this in the past. When you get a student's IEP when they move in, you try to put them in an equivalent program. For a few of the students that had moved in, there was very limited evaluation information, and so we ended up having some aides to students with disability work with a few of the students for a period of time until we were able to evaluate them. So that increased the substitute cost a bit. On a very positive note, for the overtime, we have our students participating much more in this past year with extracurricular activities. They're part of the Best Buddies program here at the high school. We have our unified sports. And then a lot of clubs they've started participating in, like Garden Club at both the middle school and the high school. So when we have our students stay for those things, we have an aide participate with them. So that's part of that increase. The health insurance buyout, we've had a number of staff people who have begun to participate in that. So while that line item is up a little bit, in another line item that Ms. Kehoe would have shown us, you'd see a decrease in people using health insurance, which was good.
Right, so it's really a net savings to the
It
district
is,
when the
but-
employee's up for that.
Absolutely, Matt, yeah. So the next 2 slides, over the course of time, the board has asked about these things, so we wanted to be able to highlight that while special ed can be an expensive place, we do get some funding back. So the top line here is our state aid for what we called out-of-district placements, but it's actually high-cost students. So for a student that might have a variety of related services and a one-on-one aid, we are able to do a high-cost stack. And this year, we were able to get back $1,110,000 for that. So that was a very good thing to see.
Cap, would that include like residential placements?
This one, Matt, includes 42 public placements and 18 privates. But yes, we can do with our residential ones, we can do them also. The second one is our Medicaid services. Over the course of this year, President Downey and Ms. Kehoe and I went to an evening workshop on Medicaid costs to make sure that we were really trying to get back as much Medicaid service dollars as we could. And we really we have a person in our office and our related service staff who do this diligently. And we were able to get back $130,000 this year. So putting those 2 together, it's $1,240,000 that came back into the general fund. Another question that we've had, because we talk a lot about our grant funds. So this slide represents the grant funding that's coming back to the district from a variety of departments. You'll see food service on there. Mr. Hurst has a number of title grants. But the top line here is the IDA, the 611 and 619 grants that we use in our office. And the $1 million that you see on the top line there represents what we were allocated this year with some rollover funds that were left from last year. So we use that for a variety of things. A lot of our technology comes out of there. You will see that we are funding 7 full-time FTEs out of that money, out of the IDA funds, and 3 FTEs for the title grants. What's important to note about that is that each year these grants go down a little bit. I know in the 5 years I've been doing this, it's gone down a little bit each year. So we always want to be mindful of the positions that we're funding through here, because they're needed positions.
Ms. Jones, can I ask you a question? So the positions you're funding from, are those positions represented in the previous slide where you listed your number of employees?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, they are. No?
No, those are just the general fund employees who were listed on those other slides.
Okay, so those
So
costs.
these are outside of that, which is why we're showing them here.
Okay, that's
Just so
why I
you
was-
have a sense that if that grant funding were to go away, there
Okay.
could be a significant impact on costs in the
Got it.
general fund or a significant impact on services.
So
Although
that's-
some clarification, like I had put, part of a CSE chair is
Yes.
funded through this, but I listed them as an employee,
Yeah.
part of a speech pathologist, so there's like a .4 FTE.
That's where it says
But-
on the
Yeah.
bottom, that little, on
Yes.
page 23, it said.
Yes.
Okay, got it, thank you.
And I think Congress is in the process of, if they're doing anything, process of reauthorization of the IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And there was a promise made back in 1975 that we'd be funded 40%. That was considered full funding. And at times, I've seen it as low as 9% and as high as 17%. And hopefully, they'll be in the upward direction.
That would be nice.
I think it'd be.
Don't vote for anyone who's
I was going to
not
say, you're optimistic.
Education.
Too optimistic.
Okay. So these are the requested additions for our department. Before I explain these additions, I want to just kind of do a brief overview of the last few years. In the 5 years that I've held this position, we've laid off 47, or we've lost 47 staff people in our department. 10 of those were special education teachers, 29 aides to students with disabilities, and then we had the loss of a psychologist, a social worker, and 2 speech pathologists. So we've really, I feel like my department has worked so hard to provide the best services to students with disabilities, given the challenging times we've all had. But we're really at a point where we need to make some requests. So the number one thing on here is a high school special education teacher for our intensive skills class. As you may recall, we've had the board come and see a program about our intensive skills class over at Ellesmere. In 2007, we opened one class there, then we went to a second class to have primary and intermediate. In 2012, we grew that up to the middle school, and we've had that program at the middle school. So now for September, those students are ready to come up to the high school. And we've really done, I feel like the staff has done a phenomenal job in servicing those students. So that would be, that top line item is for a teacher, and we would need 2 aides to go along with that program. The next line is an increase in our sub-rates for nurses. As you may recall, a couple of years ago, we believed that our sub-rate was higher for nurses than any of the other schools in the area, and we lowered that. Now we find ourselves in a different position, and we really are asking that we raise that from $17.50 to $20 to be competitive. We've had a hard time getting sub-nurses. The next line is an increase in my BOCES funding. As I mentioned to you, we've had a significant amount of need for students, primarily with mental health issues, to be placed in either Cap Region or Quest or BOCES. And we've tried to move things, but in order to service students, we're making it work this year, but in order to service those students for next year, we would need an additional $256,000. Continuing at the elementary level, we have a skills program, a K1, a 2-3, and a 4-5. Our numbers, our projected numbers for that program, primarily at the K1 class, which is a 12-1-1 classroom, are already at 17. So even with a variance, that's not something that's really doable for that population. So we're looking for an increase there with, again, 2 aides to go along with it. And then given the uptick at the middle school, in order to service all of our students in both our resource room programs and our direct consultant teacher, we're asking for a 0.6 increase there with another additional aide.
Kathy, how many retirements are you anticipating in your program?
I have 2 special education teachers retiring this year, and a psychologist retiring. I think that's it.
So there'll be some breakage there?
Yes. We would be replacing all 3 of those positions, though, but yes, there would be some breakage.
Any questions for Kathy?
Would the middle school teacher only be .6, or is there someone there that's .4 and to
No,
make
we
it a
would be,
full,
we would be looking at a 0.6 position. It would be an additional position.
which would be tough to find, isn't it?
Quite honestly, Lynn, right now,
Full-time
it's
positions.
tough to find
Full-time positions right now.
any positions. But I tried to be very cognizant of the fact that we've stretched people to the best of our ability. We did scheduling based on anticipated, we're about halfway through our annual review season, and what it looked like we needed was a 0.6, not a 1.0. It might be hard to find, but I was trying to be as realistic as possible.
You never know. Also, that could end up being combined if someone's duly certified with another part-time position in the district in another area. So we still have the ability to look at that as an option to get, to become a more attractive position.
Anyone else, any questions for Kathy? Thank you, Kathy.
Okay.
On the action items portion of the agenda tonight will be the adoption of the legal ad. This is where we're defining what's going to be published in the local newspapers, advertising the vote on the 17th, noting that we have 2 Board of Education seats available, and then also the bus purchase proposition at 15 buses as recommended by the district. And the library language will also be included within that official legal ad. Remember, their vote is also same date and time as the district's vote.
Right.
Could you just remind the community when the deadline is for the petitions
The
for
petitions
board
to
seats?
come in was
The next,
April 18th?
it's on the next slide.
It is, okay.
Oh, it is, okay, sorry.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. Yes, April 18th,
There
look
you
at
go.
that,
Yes.
due by
I didn't
5.
read ahead.
5 PM, okay. So our next meeting, of course, as you had mentioned earlier, is on Tuesday, April 5th, and that will be the bulk of the instructional program, where Dave Hurst will review that. And then on the 13th, we tentatively will have another meeting where we can start to make some decisions. We're hoping by April 5th, we'll have some news from the state. So as part of our updates, we'll include those updated totals for you on state aid and/or minimum wage. And we'll be in the home stretch of creating the budget for the coming year. And that's it for presentations.
Great, thank you. The next agenda item, the board would recognize anyone in the audience who would like to address the board on an agenda item. Is there anybody who would like to address the board? Yeah. All right, if you'd come up to the microphone. State your name, although we know it, but you're for the television.
Hi.
Hi,
Joanne Hicks. I apologize, I can't figure out how to use the Wi-Fi here on my phone. I want to discuss one of the agenda items, which is the tutoring, second reading of the tutoring proposal that you have up. Anybody familiar with that?
Policy.
Policy, tutoring policy. In reading, when I saw that on there, it kind of caught my eye, and I'm wondering what precipitated to have to bring up a tutoring policy? Because as it states, a student is not allowed to be tutored by their teacher that they have presently. So was there a reason that precipitated this policy to come to bear?
We did or didn't?
We did not have a policy.
We did not have a policy on it, so I think it was a matter of establishing a policy
Okay.
about that.
So was there a reason, is there any reason why a particular teacher is not allowed to tutor a student within their class? It says on it, a conflict of interest. So did a lawyer come and say we need to have this policy because there could be a conflict of interest that a professional teacher who has taught in this district, who is tutoring my son or daughter after school, who they happen to have as a teacher, what is the conflict of interest that they think there is going to be that that teacher cannot tutor after school?
The conflict of interest is that the student is assigned to a teacher during a designated period of time, and that teacher provides a grade. So if they're getting additional, the district is already paying that teacher to work with that student during the time frame. So if they're getting money privately from a parent, there's an incentive to perhaps change the grade. I'm not saying this is done. I'm just saying that's the conflict of interest. So our teachers can tutor students, just not in their own class when they're assigned to give them a grade.
So you say like in the ninth period, that's when kids get extra help or tutoring or.
Right.
Correct.
You just
Right.
can't
I
compensate
think the
them.
key
They can't be
issue
paid
is
Right.
if they're
Can't compensate
paid.
them.
Right.
We can't do it for pay.
Yeah, they can meet with them after school and work with them during ninth period, but they can't be separately paid by a parent when they're actually providing a service that the district is paying them for currently.
Okay.
And this was based on a recommended policy developed by the New York State School Boards Association Policy Department.
Okay. My question then goes, maybe not so much for the high school, but for elementary school and middle school. When you have a child in elementary school who gets private tutored, and if anybody walks into the library at 3 o'clock, you are going to see pretty much more than half of that library is filled with Bethlehem teachers tutoring kids. A significant portion of them are elementary students who get reading services. And they are coming from either their homeroom teacher, which you only have one, you're not transferring students in a class back and forth in elementary school, or their special ed reading instructor. So those students that have those that get tutored after school, go to the library with them, those are the teachers that they know. The teachers know the student, they know their weaknesses, they know how to get through to them. So there's a disadvantage now given to that student to have to go to another teacher at another time. And I
But the-
understand your conflict of interest as far as if they're getting money or whatnot, but when is there the appropriateness of, a teacher is a profession. They're bound to, they're not going after school after being with these rugrats for 8 hours and want to go hang out there, that they're going to give them, an inflated grade. I just find it hard at that level, and then also at the middle school level when you're confined to houses now, where those teachers know your student, and if you have a math teacher that you're going to get tutored from after school, and then you can't have the math teacher in 7P1, you need to go to the Mohawk teacher who doesn't know you, who doesn't know the student, who you might not be comfortable with. How is that beneficial to the kids? And then, I don't know how it is in high school with, students, but particularly one of the major things where they get tutored in is math. And there are some, no disrespect, there are some very good math teachers in this district, and there are some math teachers that students, I'm sure, would say, you know what, not so good. So if you know that algebra trig teacher who tutors is a very good teacher, you want that. As a mother, I want that one for my son or my daughter. And if I have to go to another one who might not be so strong, but they do tutor, how does that help the student?
I guess I would say it is a conflict of interest. When the teacher is being paid to teach a student and then subsequently earning additional money, and again, they're responsible for the grade of the student. So it's a conflict, and there are plenty of very qualified and very good tutors in every subject area. And my own children had tutors, and they always had someone other than who their classroom teacher was.
Okay.
Yeah, and they often, consult with the teacher also.
Right, yeah. I
Guidance
mean, they always got
counselors.
what the students were working and what my children were working on, got the plans from the classroom teacher. They'll always help out and assist in that way, too.
And there's
I
lists in
believe
the
the-
guidance, oh, go ahead. There's lists in the
I
guidance.
believe
now.
the intent was to protect the teacher from any kind of allegations of impropriety. You know, in an ideal situation, if they were tutoring the student, suddenly the student goes from getting a 60 to a 90. It could be because it's really good tutoring, but there could be people in the community who would be saying, well, you know, he's getting paid to tutor this student, how do we know? And so I think the intent is just to protect the teacher from those kinds of allegations being thrown at them.
Okay.
I think it's in one of these situations where it's an uncomfortable balance that has to be drawn. It may not serve a particular student because he or she may like a particular teacher, have a relationship, but as a board and as a district, we have to have policies in place where we're advised to have them that maybe not prevent questioning, but perhaps reduces it. It's just one of those things that we have to do,
Okay.
strike that balance.
One last thing. I'm okay with those answers, that's fine. The one part of the policy also stated that if you were going to provide tutoring to a student who is not in your class, you needed to run that by the principal.
There's two components of the tutoring, I think. One has to do with private tutoring, teachers getting paid for, and one has to do with when we're assigning tutors. I think that's what you're referencing. So there's two different pieces to that, so you might be mixing the two of them up.
Okay, so then how about the one where you're getting paid? You have to still run that by the principal, or no?
Not if it's not your student.
If it's not your student,
If
okay.
you're not, if you're tutoring just outside other students, that's a different, the teacher can do that on their own.
Okay, that was it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. I think it's the first time we've ever got a question on a policy. It's good to know people are reading them. Good. Anyone else would like to address the board on an agenda item? Yes, if you'd come up to the microphone and state your name.
Hello, I am Lucas Cully. I've been doing track for 4 years, and I just wanted to address the modified program. I think on the surface, it seems like a really great program. It's going to allow a lot of middle schoolers who might not have the opportunity to join the high school track team. It gives them that opportunity. But I think one of the major draws of track for me was during my freshman year, I got to see all the older kids perform and do really well, and they were great role models to me. And I think separating the ninth graders from them and getting rid of that role model might decrease levels of commitment and maybe even their development as a person, because I think the track program is really great at developing people.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Okay. Moving on. Item 8, Finance. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following finance action items A through B.
So moved.
First and a second, any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstention? That item carries. Item number 9, Professional Personnel. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following professional personnel action items A through F.
Second.
First and second, all in favor, or any discussion? Sorry. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstention? That item carries. Item number 10, Support Personnel. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following support action items A through C.
So moved.
Second.
First and a second, any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That carries. Item number 11, Other Action. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following action items A through D.
So moved.
Maybe we should do some of these individually, because the bus purchase one probably should be
Other
an
resolution.
individual vote,
Okay.
I would think. Judy, do you?
So it'd be like 8.
All right, then can I have a motion to amend?
So moved.
Okay. And so items number A through, which is, what? A and B?
So moved. Right, so that's that.
First and second. Any discussion on A and B?
I do have a question on the timeout room policy. Was that policy developed in consultation? Are there any state guidelines for the use of those rooms? Yes,
Correct.
so it's
There are.
consistent with that?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstention? That item A and B pass. Again, under item number 11, it is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following action item C.
So moved. Second.
First and second, any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed, any abstentions? That item carries. Item C of 11. On item 11, it is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following, action item D.
So moved. Second.
That's the first and the second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed, any abstentions? That item carries. Okay, I guess we really didn't need to separate it out. Recognition of visitors on any non-agenda item. Anyone like to address the board on a non-agenda item? No? Okay. Future meetings. The next Board of Education meeting is April 5th. Again, that is a Tuesday night here at the high school with a 6 p.m. executive session start and a 7 p.m. public meeting. The next school board meeting after that will be Tuesday, April 19th at 6 p.m. executive session, 7 p.m. public meeting. Again, that's here at the high school. There is a BOCES annual board meeting on Wednesday, April 6th that any of the board members that would like to should attend. If you just let Brittany know, she'll do our reservations. In addition, I'd like to also mention that, and as a reminder, that April 18th, there are petitions due for the Board of Education. There are 2 seats up this year. The seat held by Mike, he is going to run again. Diane Giacconi, she has announced that she will not be running again. So we'd like to get some interest from the community and people to run for the board. And then there will be, on April 19th, we'll do the last date for budget adoption and approval of the property tax cap report card. And then on May 3rd, there will be a Meet the Candidates night for all those who will be running. So,
Can I just say
and
something?
petitions are due, when are petitions? The 18th, okay. Oh, yeah, I had already said that, sorry. Yes.
I know I've met with a member of the community, and someone else asked me to meet with them to just talk about, what do you do and how much time does it take? So if people are interested, one of the best ways of getting additional information besides watching the tapes and coming to a meeting is to just reach out to a board member and say, what is it that you do and how much time does it take? So really encourage people to do that. I think all of us would be willing to try to schedule that if people were interested.
Yeah, actually, can I just make a little pitch? And that is, as someone who has only 3 kids now in the district, for those of you parents out there that have kids in the district, it is incredibly interesting and relevant because everything that you're talking about directly impacts your child. So I know probably people out there think it takes a ton of time. It actually does take a lot of time, but it's not in any way kind of tedious or, work that's not interesting. It's really, really interesting work. And I mean, I think everybody up here really enjoys it. And, we're a collaborative group. We talk a lot. But it's really a wonderful experience. So for folks that are contemplating it and don't want to jump in because you might be intimidated, like Charmaine said, talk to one of us. But it really is really, really fascinating, interesting, very relevant work.
And I think through those discussions, I know at least one conversation, I've had several community members, a person said, well, don't you do this, this, and this? I said, no, actually, we don't. So to get a sense of what is the role of the board is incredibly important before you jump in, because I think one person said, well, I'm interested if we do that, if you do this. And I said, no, we don't. That's the superintendent's job. So it's important to have that kind of discussion, I think.
Okay. We do have a need to go back into executive session. However, we will not be taking any public vote after executive session, so this will conclude our public part of the meeting. And PIG students, if you can come up and sign out, we'll have sign-out sheets. Do we have some sign-out sheets? Yep, okay. And we can...